بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
اطلب العلم أخي فهو درب به نور، به ترقى به تحيا عالما حرا فخور. اطلب العلم أخي فهو درب به نور، به ترقى به تحيا عالما حرا فخور. اطلب العلم أخي فهو درب به نور، به ترقى به تحيا عالما حرا فخور. سل إماما عاش في العلم دهورا ودهور، يطلب العلم ببذل حتى ضمته البحور. سل إماما عاش في العلم دهورا ودهور، يطلب العلم ببذل حتى ضمته البحور. صابرا في العلم صبرا حتى سموه الصبور، يخرج العلم بفأل مثل ريحان الزهور. صابرا في العلم صبرا حتى سموه الصبور، يخرج العلم بفأل مثل ريحان الزهور. اطلب العلم أخي فهو درب به نور، به ترقى به تحيا عالما حرا فخور. اطلب العلم أخي فهو درب به نور، به تحيا عالما حرا فخور. كن إذا سموك اسما لتكن مثل الحضور، كن رفيقا كن عظيما كن كما تلك صقور. كن إذا سموك اسما لتكن مثل الحضور، كن رفيقا كن عظيما كن كما تلك صقور. راقيا بالعلم نحو النجم مزدان شكور، رافضا به نور، به ترقى به تحيا عالما حرا فخور. اطلب العلم أخي فهو درب به نور، به ترقى به تحيا عالما حرا فخور. ابن مسعود فقيه علم أحيا القفور، فإذا أعطاك رأيا كان سهما في النحور. ابن مسعود فقيه علم أحيا القفور، فإذا أعطاك رأيا كان سهما في النحور. وعلي ثم بالدين معاذ ليبور، اقرأوا التاريخ تروي عنه أفواه سطور. اطلب العلم أخي فهو درب به نور، به ترقى به تحيا عالما حرا فخور. اطلب العلم أخي فهو درب به نور، به ترقى به تحيا عالما حرا فخور. إن سألت عن إمام أو فقيه في الأمور، ابن عباس ترنم وسيبقى في الصدور. إن سألت عن إمام أو فقيه في الأمور، ابن عباس ترنم وسيبقى في الصدور. فهو كالشمعة تذهب حتى تأتينا بنور، ساهر بالليل علم وبأوقات سحور. اطلب العلم أخي فهو درب به نور، به ترقى به تحيا عالما حرا فخور. اطلب العلم أخي فهو درب به نور، به ترقى به تحيا عالما حرا فخور. إذ بكى النبي يوما سمعا صوتا جهور، يا أبي كم روت عنك الليالي والعصور. إذ بكى النبي يوما سمعا صوتا جهور، يا أبي كم روت عنك الليالي.
الحمد لله رب العالمين، الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Welcome to Islamic Oasis Live this Friday evening. We have a very special topic and a special guest again this Jum'ah. As you all know, brothers and sisters, what is taking place in between Russia and Ukraine in Central Asia. The question being asked today is that is the political events, the war, can this lead to a World War III? Or a question could be asked whether this is another American maneuver to split China and Russia, or is it to split and use NATO to solidify American interest in Europe, where Europe cannot do anything as a united by itself as an EU. Rather, it would have to depend on American strategy or NATO, which is America, to do anything when it comes to security, even the security of Europe. There are many issues, there are many discussions, and one of the main things that we need to be looking at also is that what should the Muslim Ummah be thinking? especially in places and times like this where many things have happened in the last year with the Muslims, the rise of Taliban and taking over of Afghanistan. Questions should be asked such as, if Russia, due to its security, can take over Ukraine or at least replace the government of Ukraine for its own security, would it be possible for Pakistan, for instance, to join hands with their brothers in Afghanistan and say, well, this is also a security issue as far as Muslims are concerned, that we are a united ummah? Many things can be asked. And for that, we have invited, of course, our brother, a scholar, a teacher, a professor, Dr. Abu Talha Al-Malkawi, to discuss these very deep issues that need to be discussed, inshallah. So, Dr. Abu Talha, welcome to Islamic Oasis once again. I think he's frozen on his. Abu Talha, can you hear me? Okay, so while we wait for Abu Talha, we really need him on. This is a very interesting topic that we want every minute from Abu Talha. The moment he gets on, there's issues that we're having, as for their technical issues that really we can't do anything about. There's delays on his end. So, speak up. So, inshallah, brothers and sisters, as we wait for Abu Talha to get on, come on, we'll continue the discussion. I mean, as you know, that the issue with Ukraine started 2007. Then it went on 2007, then 2014, in the name of Orange Revolution. In reality, which was caused by the Americans. Even at that time, many of you may be well aware that Americans created what's so-called the Orange Revolution, had many of the American politicians, NGOs involved in trying to get rid of the Russian man, it seems, in Ukraine, and then he ran away, and then they established who we have today. But the move of NATO seems to have caused another mess in this issue. So, Dr. Malkawi, welcome to Islamic Oasis Live.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you very much, Brother Shirazi, and welcome everybody in this at this early morning my time and evening Chicago time. And I'm again thankful to you, Brother Shirazi, for arranging these type of meetings and discussions, so that we can understand what's going on in the world and our duties and responsibilities in regard to those events, crises, wars, what's happening in this world.
So let me ask you, Dr. Abu Talha, Sheikh, is Putin being irrational, or has he taken a rational step?
Well, the issue here is not to discuss his mental or psychological behavior as what has been. Let me see. I have an echo here. Just one second.
I read Rand. Rand had a very special run on Putin, and they were saying that it seems that the title was "Is Putin Irrational?" And the idea was that how can we have supposedly nuclear weapons in the hand of a person who could go bonkers? So, or is it existentialist threat for Putin? He did not have a choice. There was checkmate. Is that what happened?
Well, it's a bit more than that, brother. It's a bit more than that. It's not a simplistic manner to say he's psychologically rational or irrational, or to analyze a situation of this scale from the perspective of his psychological behavior. This was one of the mistakes that were done during the Second World War, when Hitler started the Second World War by invading one of its neighbors, and then today and then they used to talk about his irrationality and that he's out of his mind, etc. but nevertheless, a war at this scale and the crisis at this scale cannot be discussed from the psychological behavior of a man. After all, Putin runs a large country, and that country cannot be run by an individual. So there is a government, there is a whole parade of thinkers, strategic philosophers, people who military people, generals. So that type of analysis by Rand or by some statements by the CIA, etc. That's just to deviate the people from the truth, what is going on in the world. That said, we can move into looking into some historical events and current events at the world arena.
So let me, the way I was thinking was that Sheikh, I mean, I'm looking at it from the American perspective here. I mean, it looks, would it be, would be, for America, did America split an area, a region of the world that could have been, let's say China and Russia, a formation that could have been formed in a region? Did America cause this? If America caused, I'm just looking at it from an analysis perspective, but it seems like it caused a split between Russia and China by causing this. Because now, and secondly, if you can answer the issue, is Russia, can Russia make moves, or is it stuck that it doesn't have a choice in whatever is happening?
Well, let me give some background here, brother, before I really go deep into what's going on. In the recent history, recent history means less than 100 years. In 1961, when the Soviet Union was in a Cold War with the United States, and the Soviet Union had proved to be a very large nuclear power which can be a rival to the United States. We remember, at least some of us who are old enough to remember some of these days or had read about them, the Cuban Missile Crisis, when the Soviet Union decided or thought that Fidel Castro is pro-Soviet Union or pro-socialism, and Castro had adopted officially the socialist ideology, although there are some caveats here. I'm not going to discuss that variation. But at the end of the day, the Soviets were shipping in the sea a ship full of rockets which can carry nuclear warheads to be stationed in the backyard of the United States. And then at that time, both countries, they decided to meet in the middle or somewhere in Europe, and before that in Yalta in an island in the Mediterranean, where they decided that nuclear warfare between the two countries is impossible or should not happen. So let's make a deal. And that deal they made, that the United States and the Soviet Union at the time would collaborate on international issues. They will be the major the only two major powers who can resolve global crisis, if you will, or to have a say into what we call global cases, global crises or problems. And to them both to the United States and the Soviet Union, the major power to suppress or to not to allow it to become a superpower or a power that can really have an impact on world affairs was Europe, which has just come out of the Second World War, which had done tremendous devastation to the humanity at the time, where more than 65 million people were killed. during that war. So the decision was, so let's make a deal between both giants to suppress any potential rise of the old, let's call it the previous superpowers, which is Britain, France, and Germany, and Europe at large. So that said, today, in the current world affairs, since 1991, since the collapse of the Soviet Union, actually the world had one superpower that had to run the affairs of the world and had to keep everything intact, which is the United States. Of course, this is very costly. It costs the United States dearly to run the world affairs and to make sure that big powers like China, like Europe, may not rise to the level of becoming a threat to world peace and to the integrity of the world, the international relations, if you will. Since 1991, there was, in general, there could have been a very serious vacuum in the world where Britain, France, Germany, Europe can reunite, which we have seen that Europe, the EU was established almost 5 months after the announcement of the dismantlement of the Soviet Union back in March to 1992 when they announced the Maastricht agreement for the EU. In less than 4 years after that, they announced the unified currency for Europe, which is the euro. In less than almost within the same period of time, they announced the Schengen, where they removed the borders between these countries. So actually, Europe was becoming a super, as Europe, as an EU, was rising up to a very potentially a superpower, which can compete again one more time with the United States, can compete for gaining the lots of influence or regaining its influence in the Middle East, in Africa, and Asia, and many places in the world. So this was very serious. And they were one step away from actually announcing the United European States when they voted for a unified constitution for all of these states. So this was to the United States, this was very dangerous. So that's why with the absence of a Cold War with Russia or with China at the time, where the United States did not find a country to play the role of an enemy, so they decided to go after Islam and what they called Islamic terrorism or terrorism at large, which they have used since 2001 until recently as the quote-unquote the virtual enemy by which they can scare, if you will, the rest of the world. Because the United States, it has been proven beyond the shadow of a doubt, was behind many of the they're called the terrorist attacks. They are the ones who orchestrated that, or they allowed it. In a similar manner, when they allowed the Pearl Harbor to take place in order to go after Japan and to destroy its rising power. The United States, without any doubt, was behind the creation of the so-called fight against Islamic terrorism, which they really kept everybody in check. Now, that it could not have lasted for a long time because this terrorism is a virtual enemy. It's not a real enemy. Plus, they really antagonized an ideological world base, which is Islam, which could, in principle, become a real challenge. And that is very scary, not only to Europe, but to the United States itself. So since the end of the Obama era, the United States started seeking an alternative. And then Trump came. We all remember how he went after China, and he wanted to drag China's foot into a Cold War. And we have seen how China resisted that publicly. The Prime Minister of China, the Foreign Minister of China, many of their top officials, time and time again, they declared that United States is trying to pull our foot into a Cold War. We do not want to play that role. Let America deal with its own issues on its own. We cannot do that. We will not do it. And that's one of the reasons, in my opinion, that Trump really was asked, or he had to leave the office by somehow, whether through elections or not elections. He knows why. We know why. Because America needs a rival, and America needs someone who can really play in the hands of America in order to suppress the rise of Europe. Again, China would not do that. China wants to deal with the rest of the world on pure trade manner. So then we have seen how Biden came into power. One of the first major strikes that Biden made was the visit or the agreement or the meeting between Biden and Putin in Geneva in June of 2021, which is about 9 months ago. June the 16th, they met and they announced there the only thing that they came up with that they have agreed to collaborate on is what they called it global strategic stability. And that's exactly what we are seeing today. The result of that meeting and the agreement, it's very similar to the agreement between Khrushchev and Kennedy back in 1961. When they agreed on the on sustaining global peace, they called it at the time world peace, and today they called it the strategic stability. What is strategic stability? Strategic stability means allow everything that threatens the stability or the current world affairs and world order in a strategic manner. You have to make sure that it's under check. You do not allow anyone to destabilize the strategic issues in the world. The most pending strategic issue that United States had always, I'm not going to say feared of, but had really wanted to keep it under check, is the potential rise of another superpower that can compete for real, not for fake, but for real, with the United States influence in the world. And that's nothing but Europe. Look, India cannot dominate the world, cannot become a rival. Brazil cannot do that. Middle East, no country in the Middle East can do that. No country in Africa can do that. China doesn't want to do that. China can or has the potential, but doesn't want to, because China, by default, the Chinese makeup, the Chinese culture, the Chinese ideology is an ideology of it's a non-invasive ideology. I'm not talking about Chinese socialism. I'm talking the Chinese deep culture. Chinese have always been on the defense. It's a defensive country. They can defend themselves, but they do not attack others. They do not scare others. They do not go into crisis with others. They are people, even when you look at the martial arts created by China, it's a defensive martial art. It's not offensive. It's not like the one in Japan or Korea or the rest of the world. So this China at one point of time built a big wall around China, so that just keep me away from my enemies, keep my enemies away from me. So this is China. So China is not the one. So the only one that has the capability and has the intention and wants to play a vital international and world in the international and world affairs vital role is Europe. Now, when we talk Europe, we mean Britain, we mean France, we mean Germany, and then maybe potentially Italy, Spain, and some of those countries around them who can follow either France or Germany or Britain. So this is the big issue for the United States. So in June 2021, Putin and Biden, they did have a collaborative agreement that both will be responsible for the sustaining strategic stability. Now, come a few months later, the crisis of Ukraine were elevated to the point where Russia seemed to be compelled to invade. How did this happen? Ukraine asks or sends a request to NATO to join NATO, which Russia had said time and time again will not allow NATO to expand to the east any further. Although in reality, if I want to elaborate a little bit on this, Russia has on its north western border Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia. Those three countries, they are part of NATO, and they have direct access or direct link to the rest of the NATO powers from the sea, where the North Sea and the Baltic Sea, which are connected together, though they have direct borders and interface with these three countries. And Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, they are the three of them. They are the size or more than the size of the Ukraine. They have more interface, larger interface borders with Russia. They are closer to the Russian, to the depth of Russia, very close to St. Petersburg, not far away from Moscow. So those countries are real from the perspective, the current perspective of Russians. If they really don't like the NATO to be on the borders of Russia, those countries have borders. And Russia did not take any action against them. They did not do anything there. So now, out of a sudden, when Ukraine wants to become part of NATO, oh, it's a problem, it's a crisis. So the issue is not the fact that Ukraine wanted to be part of NATO. The issue is that there needs to be a trigger to create a world crisis, a crisis that everybody fears that it could escalate into a global war. And that's why they kept saying time and time again, if the NATO is involved with this war, that means it's the start of a third world war, which could escalate into a nuclear one. It's a scary type of event. Who is the one who feels threatened the most? No doubt it's Europe, because it's almost said publicly by all types of politicians that the Europe security is at stake here. It's the Europe security is the one which is at stake. It's not the United States because it's far away. It's not the Middle East. It's not Japan. It's Europe, because the war is in the backyard of Europe. So Europe is the one that fears the crisis would impact it. So I have to come to the conclusion by eliminating all other possibilities that this war, the one of the objectives that this war serves is one of the objectives is to make sure that Europe understands that it is not in its interest to stay away from the United States or to get away from the NATO umbrella, if you will. That is one major objective. Second major objective, brother, we know how big the rift in the United States was created between the components of its society, between the whites and the blacks, between the Democrats and the Republicans, between the have and the have-nots, through the Trump era until recently. In fact, it was one of the major points that made up the elections, the previous elections, is the divide of the American nations. And everybody knows, and this is not a secret, that United States makeup had never united in the past, absolutely, to become as a one nation, one solid nation, without an external enemy that threatens the very being of the American dream or the power of America. So they needed some type of world crisis that where the United States people, I'm talking about the people, feel that for now, let's be united. Let's stick together. Let's be a nation. Let's not allow divisions to break us away. So they needed something of this type. They need to promote Russia to a place where Russia can become apparently a threat, which is not really. I mean, Russia cannot compete with the United States. Russia economy is less than 20% of the American economy. Russia's spending on the defense is way below what America can spend on its defense. So Russia by no means is a global power, by no means. Obama called Russia at the time, Russia is no more than a regional power. Biden, during the Geneva conference in June 2021, promoted Putin and Russia to a level of a global power. He said, America and Russia are the only two global powers. And that's stated in their statements, which means now United States people, as people, they have one reason to put aside the differences and forget about what Trump had done to America, to the division, which we have seen how there was a revolution almost in the make when they invaded the people invaded the Capitol Hill and the Congress station. It was a disaster. America had never seen something like that, and America cannot continue to live and to become a superpower if American nation is not united from within. So this is a second objective of a world level crisis. Whether now whether America collaborated with Russia or agreed with them or not, that's not the issue. The issue is that there is a crisis on the ground. Something happened. Now, who is benefiting? What's the greatest benefit here or the objective achieved? Europe, one more time, is under check. They know that their security cannot be guaranteed without being within the NATO. And we have seen how Germany asked for $200 billion for its military budget. For the first time in history, they doubled their spending on military. Now, some people, they think that this means that Germany and Europe now are becoming more, they want to create their own independence from the United States. It's on the contrary. When Germany asks for $200 billion to be part of the defense budget, and we know for sure as a fact that Germany is not a militant country. So where would this money go? This money will go into supporting its alliance with the NATO, with the military of the NATO. It will have to spend more money on NATO, not on Europe's security forces, because that is not in place yet. So we are seeing that in Europe.
What happens to Russia, Dr. Abu Talha? What happens now? I mean, look, there's a lot that you said that we have to discuss here. I mean, NATO security is a big deal. European security is EU issue is another deal.
Yes.
So Russia, what is the future of Russia now? I mean, even no matter what, even if Europe tries, I mean, obviously you're saying that, look, Europe issue is more of spending money to strengthen NATO alliance, but nevertheless, it's rearming Germany. I mean, so is this? First of all, what happens to Russia? Where does this go now?
Look, Russia for the last 10 or 15 years, since Russia started breathing again, because after 1991 it was reorganizing, remaking of Russia, putting a scope to the Russian power and where it's going. But since then, Russia had become a country that looks for hot areas in the world and to participate in sustaining stability or disruption. And that had happened like in Syria, in Libya, in some places in Africa. And Russia plays the role of the big guy on the street, just like the mafia. And Putin, after the KGB that he came from, he was actually one of the masters of the mafias in Russia. He suppressed all other mafias and kept the only mafia that exists is the Russian government led by Putin. So Putin and Russia, of course, Putin now as a governor, as a president of Russia, was using its power, the power of Russia, to really play the role of someone who can help sustain stability somewhere or disrupt stability. So when Putin and Russia came into Syria to help Bashar al-Assad to sustain his power and to suppress the revolution in Syria, he did not come into Syria out of nowhere, because we know politically, and that's not a secret, and many people can subscribe to that, Syria had always been part of the sphere of influence of the United States since Hafez al-Assad was the father of Bashar was there. And when Hafez al-Assad passed away and Bashar was nominated, Bashar was less than I think he was less than 40 years of age, and the constitution of Syria was required the new president to be at least 40 years old. So Madeleine Albright, the foreign minister of during the Clinton era, she stayed in Damascus until the constitution was changed, and then she announced from Damascus that now that the constitution had allowed someone to become a president who is less than 30, who is more than 35 years old, and they changed the rule from 40 to 35 to fit Bashar, and America was the instrument for making that change. So that's not, I mean, I don't want to go details into the relationship with Syria. Syria was under the control of the United States for sure, 100%. And when this destabilization took place, the only one who was able to play the role of suppressing the revolution was Putin, Russia. So he played with the United States there. And Libya, later when Libya became a mess and no one can really stabilize Libya, or at least keep it in crisis until America can reform Libya, Russia is there, and Russia is willing and can, and that's a typical mentality of the Russians, is to facilitate someone for a pay. And that's what the mafia does. Mafia is pay me and then I can suppress the market for you. Pay me, I can kill the other mafias and don't allow them to come into you. The one who pays more, they play with him. And the only one today who can play that big, can pay the big price for the Russians is America. No one else can.
Will Russia now? I mean, with what? I mean, there's a. Okay, so look, strategic stability. That's something that you mentioned. So now you have with this war, the starting of this war. You're saying that, okay, I mean, if Russia is now busy with Ukraine, was this a way to kind of say, okay, well, Russia is not needed anymore in the Middle East. It's time for Russia to get out of, get out of Syria, get out of these areas, and focus on Ukraine in a way, just to kind of tell them, get out. It's time to get out for you. Leave. That's it. You're done. Now we're going to stabilize what we need to stabilize. And is this what's happening here? Clean up by the U.S.
Exactly. Russia, thank you. Job well done in Syria. You have suppressed a revolution.
Does this cause? Yani, so now, what's the deal with Syria? In a sense, Syrians are sending, at least the so-called Syrian government is sending army to go fight with Russians and all of this. I mean, it's a joke. I don't even know how to put it together.
It is a joke, so I'm not going to comment on that. It's a joke.
What do we? So I mean, what's the future look like, especially when we look at
Well,
Ukraine and Russia being even a food basket for the rest of the Middle East or Europe for sure, and then you have this kind of crisis. Is this to also, from the economic perspective, is this to get a handle on inflation, where they can get that money that's being printed in the billions going nowhere to at least now pay for higher prices of food? What is the deal here?
yeah. Well, the economic factor, in fact, tonight, my time, it's tomorrow your time, I'll be talking about the impact of the current crisis on the economy of the world and the economy of the Muslim Ummah in particular. So that's a topic which I will discuss tonight at Al-Waqiya TV. But what's happening today exactly, as I said, there is a major issue that America wants to stabilize, strategically stabilize. So let's talk about strategic stability. It is Europe. There is no doubt. Why? Because Europe power is growing by the day, and
So split
every
Europe.
day. So now America, rather than split, wants to make sure that the Europeans, especially France and Germany, understand that without the umbrella of the United States, they cannot survive. They cannot, and there is a big threat. Now, France and Germany do know and do understand that this is something America wants to happen. But they cannot come and announce to the world, say, look, America is putting us under check. It's real, because the threat is real. So now telling me Russia was busy in Syria and Libya, now they will be much less busy because this is bigger chunk of work. And the pay here is much more, and there is very much into it for Russia. What is in it for Russia? Number one, Russia is recognized and will be recognized as a major player in world affairs, which Russia never dreamed of after the collapse of the Soviet Union. This is something big. And once you have this status, then you can decide the fate of the future growth of the world, economically, politically, etc. Today there is a crisis. Everybody is suffering. And that's what Putin said. You make sanctions against me, okay, we all will be hurt. The one who makes the sanction will suffer, and the one against whom the sanctions are will suffer. Everybody suffers, which everybody knows. So in this sense, he's telling the Russian people, don't worry, we are not the only ones who are under pain. Everybody is under pain. Prices will go up. Oil prices are skyrocketing. And the prices of goods, of the food goods, is really going way up. So everybody is suffering. In the United States, in Europe, in Russia. So no one is better than no one. Everybody is in the same boat. Number one. Number two, we as Russians today, we are going to sit on the table which discusses major world issues. Major world issues like the future of China, the future of Europe. And that's what Russia politically had gained. Now, number three, the real power of Russia is going to be undermined. So Russia, you blow it up, you blow its power up virtually, but in reality, it's going to be weakened, because today it's engaged in a war that doesn't seem to have a quick end or a decisive end, one blow end as they thought at the beginning, or they made it look like it. That, oh, NATO, we are staying away from the war, we are not going to be engaged. But now they are facilitating the weapons to arrive in Ukraine from Poland, from Romania, and the other day
the planes. Even they're thinking of sending in fighter jets through Poland.
Yeah, through Poland and Romania. Sure. And also they are thinking of sending people to fight on side of
But Abu Talha,
Ukraine.
are you okay? Can this war expand into Europe? Is this possibility, or are you saying no? This is not going to allow. U.S. will not allow it.
No, U.S. will not allow. Russia doesn't want to do that. Russia does not want Russia wants to end the war in Ukraine today before tomorrow.
Yeah.
And every day they are putting some, relaxing some of their conditions to end the war. Russia to them, which I think this had been, there is a pre-agreement on splitting the eastern part of Ukraine, Donetsk and Nobask to split these. This is just like the Crimea, when Russia took over the Crimea and made it a de facto occupation or regaining Crimea. So now the eastern part of Ukraine will be by de facto split from Ukraine, and I think this has been done, and I don't think it will be reversed. I don't think Ukraine can reverse that, or United States will help Ukraine to reverse that. No one is talking about the need to reunite Ukraine. So that part is done, to split Ukraine from Dnipro East and Dnipro West, and that will be the new borders for Ukraine. And that's, so this is done.
You're talking about Crimea,
as far as Russia is
all of these areas to be kind of making them independent from the rest of Europe, so they don't border Europe.
And this becomes a Russian colonies, because the people who live there are majority are Russians.
Yes.
They are not Ukrainians. Ukrainians will be minorities as they are now, but Ukrainians are majority because part of greater Ukraine. But within these two regions, two republics, which they announced their independence, Russians are the vast majority. So by default, this becomes Russian state. Maybe they will unite with Russia or become part of the federation with Russia, maybe not. But nevertheless, this is Russian territory now. Now Ukraine will understand somehow that you cannot become part of a global alliance like the NATO, and that I personally think this is not a big issue for Russia. Russia today wants to stop the war and finish. They have achieved what they have achieved locally, of getting the Russian majority portions to be split out of Ukraine, which is done already. It's only a time to stabilize it. And the global issue with Europe is done. So Europe today is really under the impression and the knowledge, and as a matter of fact, that look, we will not be able to secede from NATO. And what Macron told Trump once, NATO is in the ICU, it's dying. Today, NATO is probably strengthening its power by multiple times. American troops and armies are coming into Europe, sending already many thousands of troops, putting their military bases one more time, strengthening their presence. No one is questioning that. But before this crisis, if America wanted to bring 10 soldiers of NATO, Europe will stand and say, why? Why we need them? You have to make a case. Today, you don't have to make a case to send a battalion of tanks into Latvia or Lithuania.
Sheikh,
and that's
before
what
we
America
go, we have
announced.
to take some calls here also, but I just, let me take the call. I have a few questions I have to ask, but let's take a call. There's a call coming in. Go ahead, Nakhi.
Assalamu alaikum, brothers.
Alaikum assalam.
So, Jazakallah khair for talking on this important issue about the world situation. So I have two questions. Dr. Malkawi was mentioning in his talk that Europe is the next big thing that could be a threat to the U.S. sovereignty in the entire world. But if we look at the situation from the past couple of years or more, British has, exited from the European Union, so Europe in itself is not united.
Can you understand?
So
Okay.
how does that equation play into the entire situation today?
Okay.
Another question that I have is, okay, we are discussing about the world affairs and what the situation currently around Ukraine is. My specific focal point is what is the state of the Muslim Ummah in this entire situation, and what could be the future aspirations for the Ummah, and what role can it play in the world affairs? Jazakallah khair.
Okay.
Jazakallah khair for
Thank
the
you.
question, brother.
For the first question, brother, look, Britain is a very shrewd, intelligent country. Britain, you cannot estimate its intellectual, political power, if you will, although it's not from military and economic perspective way below what the America has, but Britain had thought a few years ago that there is going to be a vacuum, and they were seeing actually a real vacuum in the political world arena, in the world political arena, which everybody anticipated, because we have seen even before Corona crisis, before all of this, the Trump era was not very successful in maintaining a strong world order. Economically, there is some chaos, lots of inflation. The real economic growth was not going correctly. So Britain had anticipated there will be a very major political vacuum in the world affairs. And they thought, will Europe, if Britain remains within Europe, Britain may not be able to practice its real political agendas and political powers. So they decided to leave. That's one. Second, Britain, when it joined Europe, it never joined Europe to strengthen Europe. Britain had always been in political conflict with Europe. And the First World War and Second World War proved that. And the France-Britain 100 Years War, which they call the 100 Years War, proves that Britain does not consider itself part of the so-called Europe. Europe really means everything beside or outside the island of Britain. So Britain happens to be close, but Britain looks at itself as a major power on its own, like United States, like Russia, like China, but not as part of Europe. So that's what Britain is. So today we see that Britain, when it talks about the threat to European security, Britain thinks that it's not included in that threat. But Britain looks at itself as part of sustaining stability, just like United States and Russia, although it doesn't have that power or that impact. So when we say that what the ordeal may bring the stability in Europe, it also includes Britain, because Britain is the one that can become a rival, is the one that can benefit from the situation when the world vacuum continues when the world vacuum of a second power of the world, just like today we have Russia now is playing that role. So Britain thinks that it can play that role, or it may play that role, or at least it will not be impacted. So this is one, as far as Britain is concerned. Now the Muslim Ummah today, unfortunately, the Muslim Ummah until today is not an active player in the world affairs. It is a target. It has been a target of partitioning, a target of colonizing, a target of keeping under the umbrellas of US or Britain or Europe or other countries. So the Muslim Ummah today is not in a position to play a role in the current crisis. Not only that, before the current crisis and the current war, actually, it's no longer a crisis, it's a war. There is a war going on, and the war is serious, it's real, it's not fake. There are people who are dying, people who are being evicted of their homes. Okay, so now the chance for the Muslim Ummah to create an Islamic power one more time, those chances are not diminishing, but they are becoming less less viable. It was more viable for the Muslim Ummah to come up and just like during the Arab Revolution, Arab Spring, to have revolutions and to bring up a new state. Hopefully, it would have been an Islamic state. This would have been there was a room, there was a path, there was some potential to do that quietly. Today, you cannot raise your head above the water when the bullets are being fired right and left. So I fear that for the coming period of time, I don't know how long it will stay. The environment, the global environment, is not prone for a rise of a new powerful state in the Muslim world or anywhere else for that matter. So today the Muslim Ummah is our chances in the world affairs to bring up some serious change are reduced. They are not diminishing, but they are reduced. They are less than what it was yesterday. So for at least now, for the current war and the crisis going on.
But Abu Talha, if somebody was to ask you, say that, I don't want to leave. I don't want to. It's a very depressing situation when you say that.
It is.
So
it is.
What is, there are some more questions, but just so, what would be the move? What move should be made to capitalize on this crisis? What would you have done? I mean, if you were in a hot seat somewhere, what move, one or two moves that you would have made to, let's say, to capitalize, or is it not possible anymore? And for instance, if Pakistan tomorrow was to say, I'm giving an example here, say that, look, we are worried that if Russia can make this move in Ukraine, knowing all the possibilities, can Pakistan say that we would like to take Afghanistan as our neighbor, not only just our neighbor, but as a country? This would not be allowed.
Look,
even.
No, that will be a very dangerous move if I was in the footsteps of the Pakistani president or Turkish president or one of those big countries. Any move at the time when bullets are being fired is very dangerous, very risky. And
meaning, who's firing the bullets here? Who's firing the bullets? Why does it?
There are bullets being fired by Russia today and Ukraine.
Okay.
And everybody is on alert. Everybody is hyper. United States is hyper. Britain is hyper. Europe is hyper. Everybody is on alert. And there is real war going on. And you want to make a move today and you say, people are busy. No, people are not busy. People are busy fighting. And if you make any move, you will be crushed. You'll be crushed. Someone will crush you without even telling you why, because they would think that you are adding more fire to the fire that's happening here. So this is just like when two gangs are fighting. It will be for a third gang to come and make a hero. They will be killed immediately, even if it was some type of peaceful or not really a real threat. Because when fire is up and being burning, the most serious move that can really devastate your power and is to try to be violent or to create another war at this time. See, look at the world wars, First and Second World War. When the Ottoman state wanted to make a move in the First World War, it was crushed. At the time, the best thing the Khilafah during the First World War was just be quiet, stay out of this war. At the end of the day, the biggest loser in the world at large, the First World War, was the Islamic State. It was the one that was divided into millions of pieces. It was the one that whose the freedom of countries was taken away until today, for more than 100 years already. Not Europe itself. Germany became, in less than a few years, one more time a world power. France gained its power back. Everybody gained their power, but the one that who engage in the war without a reason. It's not your platform. Today the platform now has been limited almost entirely to the warring factions, which is NATO on one side that is antagonizing the whole issue. Russia is responding to that, or making a move, the militant move. Ukraine is being the sacrifice, and you want to engage into this at this time into a war of your own. That is a kill. That's a kill. Now the best thing you can do, as a Muslim ummah, is to take this time to plan more, think more seriously, and see or foresee what could happen to you if you make some move, and how you can protect against it.
Plan more and think more seriously. Is that what you just said? Plan more?
Yes.
Was it that's to plan more? We need to
plan more and think more seriously, and anticipate what could happen if you make similar move tomorrow. So you will be prepared.
Let's take another question. Go ahead. Sultan of the BRICS. The Muslim world today is different to the during the Cold War era. How will this affect the Muslim world? What opportunities or challenges to the Muslim world? I think we already discussed this question. Yeah.
Yes, I answered this question.
Just next to the next question. Brother Mu'tasim Ibrahim, what are the chances that this spirals out to the out of control of the U.S. and turns into an all-out war? What will it take for something like that to take place or to happen? Can this become a war? Or this is you
look, no.
Because you said Russia will not accept this, Americans don't want this, and Germany doesn't want it. I mean, Europe doesn't want it. Period. So then there is no possibility.
No, this will not escalate into a third world war. No.
Abdul Rahman, could Muslim majority countries withstand a world war? Well, that's a question. Yes, I mean, can a world war destroy? What will happen if there was one? I mean, obviously.
Hypothetically, the world wars, if there will be a world war, it will be devastating for everybody, and maybe, here's a big maybe, countries who are outside the European sphere, who are far away from Europe, like in Africa, some places in the Middle East which are remote from Europe, they may be safe, because a world war, if it erupts, then Europe is the major target. The European will be the platform of the war, and this is what we have seen in the First and Second World War, and that's what will happen today if there is a major war that erupts. So the Muslim countries, Muslim Ummah, will be probably they will be impacted, but not as much as Europe. And that the end of that, once a war comes in and go away, and then some people stay, some people die, then new opportunities will be created. There will you will have an opportunity to regain the unity of the Ummah one more time.
Okay, I mean.
So the war. In other words, let me be very precise. A war with today's standards, with today's major players in the world. The main targets, main losers will be Russia, Europe, Britain, and partially America, partially. The ones who will be immune mostly China if it does not allow its foot to be dragged, and the countries which are almost worthless countries, and the Muslim countries are worthless countries today.
Sheikh, China, I mean, let me ask you this from an intellectual perspective. You know, I was asking, how is it, who's doing the thinking here? I mean, between the US and China, I understand the Chinese are not, they're not looking to go into war, but they are very sophisticated when it comes to how they want to keep themselves protected in every possible way. I mean, they seem to anticipate the American moves very carefully, and and Russia obviously didn't understand that, or the Europeans do understand, but they're kind of stuck in the middle. The British are. I mean, what is it that makes China the way it is, Sheikh? Yani, as far as the intellectual diplomatic core that they have,
brother, China is a makeup of thousands of years of intellectual formation. China is not a country that was created yesterday. China has maintained its own path despite its move into the socialist ideology, but socialism did not reformat the Chinese thinking, unlike the Russians. Russia, before the rise of the Soviet Union, was something. After the introduction of socialism and communism, became totally different. So Russia was impacted by its own ideology, had some reformation, but China did not. China continued to sustain its defensive type of strategy, non-offensive, had kept itself away from alliances, kept itself away from the collaboration with international big powers. They can collaborate or cooperate on trade, on the commercial status, but politically, China will not go into any alliance. China will not get involved in any war, and if it does, like in the Second World War, when Japan, or before that, occupied part of Chinese islands, China hopes to get these back, but does not make any serious move to regain whatever it has lost. Even with Taiwan, China will not
that was my
make
next
a move.
question. Can Taiwan be used?
Not well. Look, United States wanted to.
What is the red line for China? Is there a red line?
Red line for China is to invade mainland China. Someone to really invade mainland China. That's the red line. China never tolerates an external invasion from outside. It will continue to fight until it can regain its mainland. Outside mainland China, China would love to see Taiwan back, but will not make any move until and unless the world affairs, the strategic stability is totally disrupted, and it can make the move knowing that no one can object.
So when you say strategic stability, Abu Talha, is this you coined this term, or is this
Oh no! This is the main term pointed by Putin and Biden.
The so-called world order is not being used. For instance, you're using a strategic instability. So is this okay? So, Sheikh, I mean, let me ask one more. Is there any other question?
But it's not my term. Just to let you know it. Okay. Strategic stability is what came up.
I was thinking another book coming, maybe called the strategic stability.
Okay. Yeah.
Taj Khan, Assalamu alaikum, brothers. Jazakallah khair for this important discussion. I have questions regarding Syria. If Russia's job is done in Syria, then what's next? for Syria? Does the U.S. now consider Syria stable?
By and large, yes. The United States considers the threat to the regime and to the system in Syria is diminished. It's not totally gone, but it's diminished, and it can be handled by the Syrian government, which is that's what's happening today, with the help of Turkey, because Turkey is helping to sustain stability in Syria, since the militancy type of activities are diminished. So today it's politically doable by Turkey and with the internal government. So Russia's role in Syria is no longer important. So that's
Sheikh, why do you think the Russians and the Ukrainians came to Turkey now with the so-called diplomatic forum that was happening the last 2-3 days, and then it failed? But was there something that they thought maybe, especially Turkey being a NATO country, and then they come and sit down? Was there anything that they thought that could be done? Just your thoughts.
Well, I don't think they thought something would be done, but it's one way of handling the situation so it does not grow beyond its limit. So they talked in Belarus. Negotiations which still going on.
Yeah.
They talked direct between Lavrov and the foreign minister of Ukraine in Turkey. So, and I would not be surprised to see a talk between Putin and Biden one more time on the issue, but I think that talk will happen only when they already have some agreement in the making, so to make it a breakthrough agreement. So now it is just to make sure that the war does not escalate beyond the limits which it can go to. So that's why the negotiations are happening.
So, let me take one more question, and then actually I have a question too. Go ahead. From Somar Mahbani. Assalamu alaikum. I have a question. If the war between Russia and Ukraine is over, will this war break Russia or will make Russia into a more powerful nation? And how can Russia break from this war?
Well, the last part, how Russia can break away from this war, Russia is already doing, putting the conditions which sound to be the conditions which are already accomplished. Number one, Russia wants as I mentioned, the Russian part of Ukraine to be split, which is already done on the ground, and no one is going to challenge that. Second is the non-alliance of Ukraine to declare it will remain unallied, non-allied with NATO or any other faction, which already the president of Ukraine mentioned that we are ready to contemplate this issue and to discuss it, the non-alliance. So, in other words, the war, the exit of the war is being laid on the ground. Now, would Russia emerge more powerful or weaker? No, Russia will emerge as Russia, neither weaker nor stronger. Russia will become back into its own Moscow, St. Petersburg mentality, waiting for a second opportunity to participate into world affairs to prove its viability, that it's needed. And it can play this role again, whether it's in Central Asia or in Afghanistan. Remember, as when the United States pulled out of Afghanistan, there were lots of talks about Russia filling the vacuum again. But Russia decided, look, we have been there before, and that's not, we will not do that. So there were lots of talks, and when the Taliban, actually there was a big delegation that went to Moscow, but the Russians, they just said we can help remotely, but we will not go into Afghanistan to do any type of militancy or sustaining whatever. We have been burned in Afghanistan, and but would Russia have a role in containing China? together with the United States and Europe, maybe that's a possibility. That's a possibility at some point that they can do that. Look, in a nutshell, let me say, United States after Trump era with Biden, they have chosen and selected to play with Russia international world affair problems. Now, where would this stop? I don't know. Where would this stop? Probably it would stop if somebody makes a mistake. Somebody makes a serious mistake and escalates the war into something much more serious.
I mean, they've been discussing this morning, because I worry because they every time US says, well, Russia is going to attack, they did attack, and then this whole issue of fighter jets being sold to Poland, I don't know what that really means, and then the idea that Russia might use chemical weapons inside Ukraine, can that escalate anything? You don't think that would be used, or would there be? Would that create a situation of another power entering if there is chemical usage, chemical weapons?
The only powers that can get involved in this issue is United
US.
States and Europe, in particular United States through NATO, and that's a red line. That's a red line. They will not do that. After all, we know that this whole war, one of its major objectives is to strengthen NATO, unite NATO, as Condoleezza Rice mentioned the other day with an interview with Fox News.
Yes,
said,
I saw that.
Look,
yeah.
Putin managed to unite the NATO countries in a manner that I never anticipated in my lifetime. This is Condoleezza Rice.
I mean,
Says,
that's what I'm saying. I mean,
he has done.
I mean, that's what I was asking you in the beginning. Is this a checkmate? I mean, in many ways, U.S. is re-emerging as more powerful than before.
It is. It was, and I think I mentioned something like this. Before this war, before this whole crisis, the world was in a real vacuum. Real
Without
vacuum.
leadership.
Without, and
Open
everybody has thought that there is no longer need for the big brother on the street. There is no need for Big Brother. Big Brother had done its job. Okay, thank you very much. Now we are on our own, and that is the most serious threat to the stability. What was called the strategic stability is for some powers to think that no longer needed the protection and the support and the guidance of the big brother on the street, which is the United States.
So it returns back
and
as
that's
a
what the
hegemon.
United States fears the most.
It returns back as a hegemon again. I mean, now you have somebody again playing the power. Let's take one more question. If there is one more question, Abu Talha, please. Almost done here. 10
Go
minutes.
ahead.
Max Kak, will this war dent the image of U.S. as a sole superpower? How will have this affect the place of Turkey, Erdogan, as NATO ally? Will this war dent the image of U.S. as sole superpower? I think we answered this, but
the first part of the question, United States had one more time emerged as the big brother on the neighborhood. So it strengthened its image. It will allow it to control its inflation. It will It will have more control over world affairs than any time within the last 30 years. It no longer needs the bogey Islamic terrorism to scare the world with. So that part I should have mentioned. It's a relief for the Muslim Ummah for now, at least. So the United States will emerge as the major winner of this war or crisis. Now, as far as Erdogan and Turkey always looks for a role to play in alliance with the support or with the guidance of the United States. So that's why Turkey hosted the meeting between the foreign ministers of Ukraine and Russia, is to make sure that it knows exactly what the intentions of both, so they can report to America what's going on behind the scenes or deep inside these countries. So Turkey, again, is a facilitator. It's a tool that can be used whenever somebody wants to use it, like United States or even NATO at large. So being part of NATO, so it can play the role. But Turkey is not influential in the world affairs.
Last question. No more. There is one question was, are we moving towards a one-party system kind of thing? I mean, is capitalism, is there a different variation of capitalism emerging in the world? Or is it capitalism as it is, but for instance, to see China as a one-party system grow the way it is this possible? Or is this more, let's say, I guess the question, more efficiency as far as from the Chinese perspective?
Look, China, one more time. China, think of it in isolated box. World affairs, usually global affairs, you look at them as one big box which contains all the goodies in it, like hamburger. It has the sandwich, it has the French fries, it has the ketchup, it has everything. China is a box on its own which has one unique brand. So these are two different issues. Now,
so you're saying we'll stick with McDonald's?
Yes, that's the world. The capitalism, which is coming to the capitalist world, capitalism is McDonald's. It has the variations, it has varieties, different tastes, same. That's what capitalism is. Now, China has an ideology on the front, but in reality it has Chinese culture, Chinese language, Chinese ethics, Chinese style. It's one brand on its own. It's neither capitalism nor socialism. It is Chinese for the Chinese ideology. That's probably the best thing I can come up with at this early morning hours for China. But in terms of the capitalism continues to be the dominant part of the world. It has gained a new life. Capitalism was dying. Capitalism was facing serious problems because of the economic crisis, because of the big virtual economy that replaced the real economy. Capitalism was actually facing a big catastrophe. And that's what I called it in the book, the fall of capitalism. Capitalism was falling. Today, after the rise of, I would call it, a new America, after this all issues that happened during the last few years since Trump was in power, and the divisions that took place inside America, and the financial crisis, today with this war, there is a new birth, there is a new life given back to this capitalism, which could last for a few years, which is unfortunate. That's what the world is facing these days. And that, if we want to end this talk here, is before we leave the audience, it is really a pity that we as Muslims have not been able to bring up the Islamic ideology as a real challenge to capitalism, which is the only potential challenge. China is not a challenge because it doesn't like to challenge. Russia is not a challenge because it likes to play games with the big daddy, with the big power. The only potential ideological power that can rise and pose a challenge to capitalism is Islam, because Islam is internally, it has what it takes, ideology to spread justice, to play, not to be in the hands of the of the powerful against the weak. It does have the resources and the large ummah that can support and stand behind Islam. It has all what it takes to be a real power that can put a limit and does not allow this type of gangster type of ruling the world, like with America and Russia playing these issues. So Islam, unfortunately, we are late. We have not stepped in at the right time, and opportunities come and go. There was a big opportunity for Muslim Ummah to rise during the last 20 years or so, because there was really a potential vacuum there, and you could have risen to a point where you can present and introduce the Islamic state, Islamic ideology, Islamic culture, Islamic justice to the world. That opportunity is slipping away. How long it will take to come back an opportunity where we can squeeze in, not sure, but it is time. Definitely, as I said previously, it's time for the Muslim Ummah to think more seriously, to act more positively, and to seize the coming opportunity, not to allow it to slip away.
Just one more minute, Abu Talha. I mean, what am I looking for, though? I mean, if me as a student of Islamic history, as let's say, inshallah, Islamic scholarship, things like this, take just 30 seconds to say, what am I looking for? What are those signs, that the opportunities that I'm looking for? If you thought about this more,
Yes, there are two things. One is to promote to the highest extent the absolute need and urgency for the rise of the Khilafah state as a state that represents Islam and the Muslims, not Arabs, not Pakistanis, not Iranians, but as Muslims. That's number one. The need and the urgency for this type of state needs to be today, within this period where you cannot do a move, you cannot do a physical move. This ideological move, you need to strengthen it today, so that when the opportunity comes back, and what the signs of opportunity is, again, the world order should be loose. It should not be tight. Today it's very tight, it's very complex, it's very violent. You will not be able to raise your head above water. Keep underwater breathing, just take a breath and get back underwater with all the power and patience and intelligence you have. Once you know that the world has become cooler and the conflicts have been diffused, then you make the strike. Then you rise up and introduce yourself as a major power, major state. That is more complex than said, or it's easier said than done. But it requires political thinkers, it requires the scholars to be really fit for these ideas. The political parties of Islam, the ones who run Islam as in the political arena, they have to be aware of that, and they have to think this way. Now, get back, solidify your ideas, your thoughts, your ummah, gather the political, ideological support for this idea as smoothly as possible. Then, when the next time period comes, when I say next, because the previous time, which I talked about probably in one of the sessions during the last few months with you, there was a time period where we could have made a move. This now, starting February or January of 2022, this opportunity has slipped away. You have to seek the next opportunity and seize it. Don't let it pass. But we have to be prepared. We have to rise with our intellect, with our political thoughts, with our solidification. We have to now, not tomorrow, make sure that we have our plan, we have our strength, we have our ideas in perspective, and wait for the moment that you can seize and rise above the water. And that's what we can introduce to the world.
And with that, inshallah, brothers and sisters, we're going to end this. It went from an hour and a half. I know we usually do it for an hour, but just the questions that were coming in, and the topic was, obviously, we put Abu Talha in a hot spot, seat. But that's what he's good at, and we're going to keep him there for a long time, inshallah. So first of all, Abu Talha, wallah, jazakallah khair for coming. And as you know, we'll be brought back over and over, inshallah, to inshallah. Discuss these issues more and more, and I do that strategic book needs to come out soon. I think that's a very good idea. If you are there, inshallah. Yes. The next week, inshallah, brothers, we're going to discuss Egypt. We will have Dr. Mus'ad Abdul Ghani, a professor of science from Cornell University. Also, he is head of the administrative staff here at Islamic Oasis. He is played a major role in our growth here. All right, so we are actually. Let me correct myself. I think next week we have Mazhar Khan from Britain. He will be talking about. He'll be discussing from conquered, from conquering to being conquered. What in many ways. What is it again? Conquerors to conquered. How we are being conquered today at this point. History. We will discuss a lot of things. He's a very interesting. He's in South Africa at this point, but a very interesting personality to discuss a lot of these issues with him. He is. I think he lives in Europe, so that will be another major somebody from outside coming and speaking here. And after that, we'll be discussing Egypt, inshallah, brothers and sisters. As you know that I will also be in Turkey and then in Syria. So hopefully we will also discuss from the ground there with many of the brothers who are playing major role in Idlib, like Dr. Shahidul Islam and others. Inshallah, we'll try our best also to bring them on. So next few weeks are very important weeks. Keep watch this space right before Ramadan begins, inshallah. Once again, jazakumullahu khairan. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Wallah, jazakumullah khairan to all and everyone that's watching and those who participated. And inshallah, this will be a usage for the Muslim Ummah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
قد أنابا وإلى الله استجابا إن من يرجو الثواب لا يبالي بالصعاب في سبيل الله نمضي نبتغي رفع اللواء فليعد للدين مجد وليعد للدين عز منا الدماء